Blood-red banners whip in the desert wind as two armies stand poised on the sun-baked plains of Hattin. The year is 1187, and the Holy Land teeters on the brink of destiny. Across this battlefield, two leaders prepare for a confrontation that will forever alter the medieval world. From his command post, Saladin surveys the scene with calm intensity. A Kurdish warrior and visionary, he has united divided Muslim kingdoms through strategy, compassion, and sheer determination. Now, he stands at the head of the greatest army the East has seen in generations, with Jerusalem, the sacred jewel of faiths, almost within his grasp. On the other side, King Guy of Lusignan grips the reins of his warhorse, burdened by the weight of a crumbling kingdom. An unlikely ruler elevated by circumstance, he leads a Crusader force as divided as his claim to power. Behind him lies Jerusalem, a city of prophets and kings, its fate entrusted to a man who never sought such responsibility. At Hattin, these two figures, the empire builder and the reluctant king, clash in more than just a battle for territory. Their conflict will decide the future of Jerusalem and send ripples through history that still reach us today. Some see this as the end of an era, others, the beginning of a new one. But at its heart, it is something deeper, a moment when the choices of individuals shape the destiny of civilizations. This is their story, a tale of power and faith, ambition and duty, and the human choices that define history. As the sun beats down on the plains and the armies ready themselves for battle, we are drawn into a timeless drama where empires rise and fall, not just through the strength of arms, but through the character of those who lead. Born in 1137 in the Kurdish town of Tikrit, Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, known to history as Saladin, emerged from modest beginnings that belied his future impact. His father, Najm ad-Din Ayyub, served as governor of Tikrit until political upheaval forced the family to relocate, first to Mosul and then to Damascus. These early migrations exposed young Saladin to the diverse cultural and intellectual currents of the Islamic world, shaping his worldview during the height of the Islamic Golden Age. The vibrant intellectual atmosphere of Damascus, with its scholars, poets, and theologians, provided an environment where young Saladin could absorb the sophisticated traditions of Islamic thought and governance. Under the guidance of his uncle Shirkuh, a renowned military commander, Saladin developed a unique blend of martial skill and diplomatic acumen. His education encompassed not only military strategy but also Islamic law, theology, and governance, a combination that would prove crucial in his future role. Shirkuh's influence went beyond military training. He instilled in Saladin the importance of patience in strategy and the value of building lasting alliances. While his contemporaries often specialized in either scholarship or warfare, Saladin's mastery of both distinguished him as an exceptional leader in waiting. Shirkuh's influence went beyond military training. He instilled in Saladin the importance of patience and strategy and the value of building lasting alliances. While his contemporaries often specialized in either scholarship or warfare, Saladin's mastery of both distinguished him as an exceptional leader in waiting. His early years were marked by a disciplined approach to learning, combining physical training with intellectual pursuit, a balance that would characterize his later leadership style. His ascent began in earnest under the patronage of Nur ad-Din, ruler of Aleppo. Serving this powerful leader, Saladin gained first-hand experience in statecraft and military administration. Nur ad-Din's vision of a unified Islamic response to the Crusader presence deeply influenced Saladin's own political philosophy. During this period, Saladin participated in numerous campaigns and diplomatic missions, each experience adding to his growing reputation for competence and reliability. His ability to manage both military and administrative tasks with equal skill made him increasingly indispensable to Nur ad-Din's government. Nur ad-Din's vision of a unified Islamic response to the Crusader presence deeply influenced Saladin's own political philosophy. During this period, Saladin participated in numerous campaigns and diplomatic missions, each experience adding to his growing reputation for competence and reliability. His ability to manage both military and administrative tasks with equal skill made him increasingly indispensable to Nur ad-Din's government. The turning point came in 1169, when following his uncle Shirkuh's sudden death during an expedition to Egypt, Saladin was appointed vizier of the Fatimid Caliphate. This unprecedented achievement, a Sunni Kurd rising to power in a Shia state, marked the beginning of his remarkable transformation of the region. The appointment was not without controversy. Many questioned the wisdom of placing such power in the hands of a relatively young commander, However, Saladin's diplomatic skills and military prowess quickly silenced his critics. As vizier, Saladin faced immediate challenges that would have overwhelmed a lesser leader. The Fatimid court was rife with intrigue, while Egypt's military and financial systems teetered on collapse. His response was swift and systematic, restructuring the army into a disciplined fighting force, implementing economic reforms to stabilize finances, and gradually shifting Egypt's religious allegiance. He introduced new training regimens for the military, reorganized the tax system to ensure steady revenue, and carefully managed the delicate process of religious transition. By 1171, he had officially ended the Fatimid Caliphate, aligning Egypt with the Sunni Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad, a masterful stroke that legitimized his rule, while advancing his broader vision of Islamic unity. During this period, Saladin also demonstrated his skill in handling internal opposition. When faced with conspiracies from within the Fatimid establishment, he showed both firmness and mercy, executing only the ringleaders while pardoning their followers. This balanced approach to justice became a hallmark of his rule, earning him respect even from those who had opposed him. He also began building a network of loyal administrators and military commanders, many of whom would serve him faithfully for decades to come. Over the next decade, Saladin methodically expanded his influence, incorporating Syria, Yemen, and parts of Mesopotamia into his growing empire. His approach to conquest reflected a sophisticated understanding of power dynamics, preferring negotiation and strategic alliances over unnecessary bloodshed. He often secured territories through marriage alliances and diplomatic agreements, demonstrating a keen understanding of regional politics. When force proved necessary, he wielded it decisively, but his preference for reconciliation over retribution earned him loyalty from former adversaries and respect from his enemies. His military campaigns during this period were marked by careful planning and strategic innovation. Saladin introduced new tactics in siege warfare, improved the logistics of supplying his armies, and developed a more flexible approach to battlefield command. He personally led many campaigns, sharing the hardships of military life with his troops to practice that earned him their unwavering loyalty. His armies became known for their discipline and effectiveness, combining traditional cavalry tactics with new approaches to siege warfare and field battles. Saladin's personal conduct set him apart from many rulers of his era, living modestly despite his power. He often distributed his wealth to the poor and spent hours in consultation with religious scholars. His court became a center of learning and culture, attracting scholars, poets, and artists from across the Muslim world. This combination of personal piety and practical governance strengthened his legitimacy among both the masses and the elite. Yet he was not without pragmatic ruthlessness when circumstances demanded it, a complex character trait that made him both respected and feared. His administrative reforms were equally impressive. He established a sophisticated bureaucracy, improved trade routes, and invested in public infrastructure. Schools, hospitals, and fortifications were built or renovated across his territories. His governance was marked by religious tolerance, particularly toward the Christian and Jewish communities under his rule, who were generally allowed to practice their faith freely, as long as they paid their taxes and remained loyal to his administration. By the mid-1180s, Saladin had achieved what generations of Muslim leaders had only dreamed of: a united front stretching from Egypt to Syria. His forces were well-trained, his treasury stable, and his reputation unmatched. His empire was supported by a sophisticated administrative system, a powerful military, and a network of loyal governors and commanders. As he turned his attention to the Crusader states, he recognized their vulnerability, their disunity and internal corruption, presenting an opportunity that might never come again. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of the Holy Land. Saladin's rise from obscurity to supreme leadership represented more than personal ambition. It embodied the revival of Islamic unity and power in an age of fragmentation. His careful preparation, diplomatic skill, and strategic vision had created an empire capable of challenging Crusader dominance. As his armies prepared for the decisive campaign against the Crusaders, they carried with them not just weapons and supplies, but the weight of a civilization's hopes and the momentum of history itself. The story of Guy of Lusignan stands in stark historical contrast to his great adversary. Born into the minor nobility of Poitou, France, Guy's early life offered little indication of his future role in one of history's most decisive conflicts. Unlike the carefully cultivated education of Saladin, Guy's path to power came through a series of circumstances that would thrust him into leadership of the most precarious kingdom in Christendom. The Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem that Guy entered in the late 1170s was a realm of paradoxes. Despite its spiritual significance, the kingdom was plagued by political intrigue, cultural tensions, and the constant threat of external invasion. The ruling class, composed of European nobles who had established themselves in the Holy Land, maintained an uneasy balance between their Western traditions and the practical necessities of governing a diverse Eastern kingdom. Guy's ascent began with his marriage to Sibylla, sister of King Baldwin IV, in 1180. The match was controversial from its inception. Many of the kingdom's powerful barons viewed Guy as an outsider, lacking both the experience and temperament to navigate the complex politics of the Latin East. Baldwin IV, known as the Leper King for the disease that would ultimately claim his life, had initially supported the marriage but soon harbored doubts about Guy's capabilities. The relationship between Guy and Baldwin IV became increasingly strained as the king's condition deteriorated. Despite Guy's position as Baldwin's brother-in-law, the king attempted to limit his influence, recognizing the potential dangers of leaving his kingdom in unprepared hands. These concerns were not unfounded. Guy had shown little aptitude for the delicate diplomacy required, in a realm surrounded by powerful Muslim states and divided by internal factions. When Baldwin IV died in 1185, the kingdom entered a period of unprecedented instability. His young nephew and designated heir, Baldwin V, survived only briefly, leading to a succession crisis that would define the kingdom's fate. Sibylla, backed by a faction of the nobility and the influential Gerard of Rydfort, master of the Knights Templar, seized the initiative. In a controversial move, she claimed the throne for herself and immediately crowned Guy as her king consort. Guy's elevation to the throne in 1186 marked a critical turning point for the kingdom. The new king inherited a realm facing existential challenges: a resurgent Muslim world under Saladin's leadership, depleted royal finances, and a nobility divided by competing ambitions. His early decisions as king revealed both his limitations and the structural weaknesses of the kingdom he now led. Among Guy's most consequential failures was his inability to control the aggressive actions of Raynald of Chatillon, whose raids on Muslim caravans directly violated existing truces with Saladin. Raynald, a militant nobleman who controlled the strategic fortress of Kerak, had a history of provocative actions that threatened the kingdom's security. Guy's reluctance or inability to rein in Raynald's activities demonstrated a crucial weakness in his leadership: the failure to assert royal authority over powerful vassals who acted against the kingdom's interests. Guy's court became a battlefield of competing factions. The moderate faction, led by Raymond III of Tripoli, advocated for cautious diplomacy and the maintenance of truces with Saladin. The militant faction, including Raynald and Gerard of Rydfort, pushed for aggressive action against Muslim territories. Guy, lacking the political acumen to balance these competing interests, often found himself swayed by the more aggressive voices, despite the risks their policies entailed. The king's diplomatic efforts were further complicated by the complex relationship between the Crusader states and their Muslim neighbors. Unlike his predecessors, who had developed sophisticated networks of alliances and agreements with neighboring Muslim rulers, Guy struggled to maintain effective diplomatic relations. His court's inability to speak Arabic or understand local customs created barriers that previous rulers had worked hard to overcome. The military challenges facing Guy were equally daunting. The kingdom's defensive strategy had historically relied on a network of well-fortified castles and the tactical advantage provided by the military orders, the Templars and Hospitallers. However, maintaining these defenses required both financial resources and strategic coordination, areas where Guy's administration proved inadequate. The kingdom's military readiness declined as resources were misallocated, and strategic planning became subordinate to factional interests. Despite these challenges, Guy did attempt to address some of the kingdom's pressing needs. He sought to strengthen Jerusalem's defenses and maintain the alliance with the Kingdom of Tripoli. However, his efforts were hampered by his relative inexperience in Eastern warfare and his dependence on advisors who often pursued their own agendas rather than the kingdom's interests. As Saladin's power grew and the threat to the Crusader states became more apparent, Guy found himself facing decisions that would determine the future of his kingdom. The pressure to respond to Saladin's provocations mounted, while the kingdom's resources and unity continued to deteriorate. The culmination of these challenges would come at the Horns of Hattin, where Guy's limitations as a leader would be exposed. with devastating consequences. The first half of 1187 marked a period of escalating tensions in the Holy Land. Following years of provocations and counter-provocations, the fragile peace between the Crusader Kingdom and Saladin's empire finally shattered. The immediate catalyst came from Reynald of Chatillon's most audacious act yet, an attack on a Muslim caravan traveling under Saladin's personal protection. This violation of standing truces provided Saladin with the justification he had been waiting for, while exposing the deep fractures within the Crusader leadership. Saladin's response was calculated and comprehensive. Drawing upon the resources of his unified empire, he assembled a massive force that included contingents from Egypt, Syria, and Mesopotamia. His army, estimated at over 30,000 men, represented the finest military organization of its time, well-equipped, disciplined, and led by experienced commanders who had proven themselves in numerous campaigns. More importantly, it was an army united in purpose and vision, answering to a single decisive command structure. The Crusader response to this gathering storm revealed the kingdom's deep-seated problems. King Guy, attempting to assert his authority, called for a general muster at the fortress of Sephoria. The response was impressive in numbers. Nearly 20,000 men gathered, including knights from all the major noble houses, contingents from the military orders, and infantry levies from across the kingdom. However, this numerical strength masked serious vulnerabilities: divided leadership, conflicting strategic visions, and troops more accustomed to static castle defense than mobile warfare. A crucial debate unfolded at the Crusader War Council. Raymond III of Tripoli, whose wife was under siege at Tiberias, made an unexpected but strategically sound argument. The army should remain at Sephoria, where it had access to water and defensible terrain. He understood that Saladin's larger force would struggle to maintain a prolonged campaign in the harsh summer conditions. Moving the army away from its water sources, Raymond argued, would play directly into Saladin's hands. The debate that followed exposed the fatal flaws in the Crusader command structure. Gerard de Riedfort, Grand Master of the Templars and one of Guy's closest advisors, vehemently opposed Raymond's counsel. Whether motivated by personal animosity toward Raymond or genuine strategic disagreement, Gerard's influence proved decisive. He argued that failing to relieve Tiberias would demonstrate weakness and dishonor. In a private meeting with Guy, he reportedly accused those advocating caution of cowardice and treason. Guy's fateful decision to march reflected both the political pressures he faced and his own limitations as a commander. Already insecure in his authority and dependent on the support of the militant faction, he chose to overrule Raymond's advice. The order to march was given on July 3rd, committing the entire Crusader army to a dangerous advance across drought-stricken terrain. Saladin's strategic mastery became evident as the Crusader army began its march. His light cavalry harassed the Crusader columns continuously, while his main force maintained pressure on Tiberias. More crucially, his troops secured control of the water sources along the Crusaders' route. The Christian army, weighed down by heavy armor and infantry on foot, struggled to maintain formation under constant harassment and the punishing summer heat. The march quickly deteriorated into an ordeal. Crusader chroniclers describe horses collapsing from thirst and infantry struggling to maintain formation under constant arrow fire. As the army pushed eastward, Saladin's mounted archers intensified their attacks, creating chaos in the Crusader ranks while staying beyond the reach of the knights' heavy cavalry charges. By nightfall on July 3rd, the Crusader army had reached the hills of Hattin, still several miles short of their objective. Their situation was dire. The troops were dehydrated, exhausted, and effectively surrounded. Saladin seized this opportunity to tighten his grip. His forces occupied the heights around the Crusader camp and, in a tactical masterstroke, set fire to the dry brush surrounding the Christian positions. The smoke and heat from these fires further demoralized the already suffering Crusader army. The decisions made during that night would prove crucial. The Crusader leadership, recognizing their desperate situation, faced a critical choice: attempt a night breakthrough to reach water, or wait for morning and fight under increasingly desperate conditions. The lack of unity in command once again proved fatal. No coordinated plan emerged, leaving individual units to face the coming day without a clear strategy for survival. Saladin, meanwhile, methodically positioned his forces to exploit every advantage. His army formed a complete ring around the Crusader position, with mobile units ready to respond to any attempted breakout. More importantly, he had carefully preserved his army's strength and resources, ensuring they would be fresh for the decisive confrontation. As dawn broke on July 4th, the Crusader army found itself in an almost impossible position. Dehydrated, demoralized, and surrounded, they faced a well-rested enemy commanding all the tactical advantages. The stage was set for one of the most decisive battles in medieval history, a confrontation that would determine not just the fate of armies, but the future of the entire Holy Land. Dawn broke over the horns of Hattin on July 4th, 1187, revealing a landscape transformed by war. The Twin Hills, sacred to Christians as the traditional site of Christ's Sermon on the Mount, would soon witness one of history's most decisive battles. The morning air, already thick with heat, carried the acrid smell of smoldering brush fires strategically lit by Saladin's forces throughout the night. Through the haze, the exhausted Crusader army could see their worst fears confirmed. They were completely encircled by Saladin's forces, with every route to water or escape blocked. The Crusader army's disposition that morning reflected their desperate circumstances. At their center stood the true cross, the kingdom's most sacred relic, raised high as a rallying point and spiritual anchor. Around it gathered what remained of the kingdom's military might: the heavy cavalry of the noble houses, the disciplined ranks of the Templars and Hospitallers, and the increasingly desperate infantry. King Guy, attempting to project confidence he could not have felt, positioned himself near the cross with his personal guard. Saladin orchestrated his forces with the precision that had become his hallmark. His army formed three main divisions: the Egyptian forces to the west, the Syrian and Mesopotamian troops to the east, and his elite guard controlling the critical high ground. Most crucially, his archers were positioned to rake the Crusader positions with continuous fire, while staying beyond the reach of Christian heavy cavalry, a tactical advantage that would prove devastating. The battle began with a series of probing attacks by Saladin's light cavalry, testing the Crusaders' defenses while maintaining the psychological pressure of constant harassment. The Christian army, despite their desperate situation, maintained their formation initially. However, the combined effects of thirst, exhaustion, and the intensifying heat began to tell. Individual knights, unable to resist the temptation of nearby water sources, broke ranks in desperate charges that were quickly surrounded and eliminated by Saladin's mobile forces. As the morning wore on, the Crusader position became increasingly untenable. The infantry, suffering most severely from thirst, began to collapse. Some threw down their weapons and surrendered, while others clustered around the knights' horses, seeking what little shade they could find. The Muslim archers, following Saladin's tactical plan, concentrated their fire on the horses of the Christian heavy cavalry, gradually reducing the Crusaders' most formidable weapon to an immobile mass of suffering animals and frustrated knights. The critical moment came when a large contingent of Crusader infantry, primarily composed of native Syrian Christians, broke formation and attempted to flee toward the horns of Hattin. This spontaneous movement forced Guy's hand. Unable to maintain his defensive position with his army literally disintegrating around him, he ordered a general advance toward the hills, hoping to secure a more defensible position and possibly reach water. Saladin seized this moment to launch his main attack. His fresh, well-watered cavalry charged into the disrupted Crusader formations, while his infantry moved forward with discipline and purpose. The Christian army's attempt to reach the hills transformed into chaos as their formations, already weakened by thirst and fatigue, completely broke under the pressure of coordinated attacks from multiple directions. The final phase of the battle witnessed scenes that would haunt Christendom for generations. The Crusader army split into isolated groups, each fighting desperately for survival. The military orders Templars and Hospitallers demonstrated their legendary discipline, forming defensive circles and fighting to the last man. The True Cross, which had served as the army's spiritual center, was captured in fierce fighting that claimed the lives of many of its defenders. King Guy's personal battle standard became the center of increasingly desperate fighting as more and more knights rallied to their king's position. However, Saladin's forces methodically reduced these final pockets of resistance. By early afternoon, the outcome was beyond doubt. Guy himself was captured, along with many of the kingdom's most important nobles. Reynold of Chatillon, whose actions had helped precipitate the crisis, was taken prisoner, only to face personal execution by Saladin, a rare act of retribution from a leader usually known for his mercy. The aftermath revealed the scale of the catastrophe. The entire military strength of the kingdom lay dead, captured, or scattered across the battlefield. The True Cross, symbol of Crusader legitimacy in the Holy Land, was sent to Damascus as a trophy of victory, Among the captured leaders, only Guy was spared immediate execution, though his humiliation was perhaps more complete than death. He would be forced to witness the systematic collapse of his kingdom in the months that followed. Saladin's victory was comprehensive, but his conduct in triumph reinforced his reputation for chivalry. Most of the captured nobles were treated with respect, and arrangements were quickly made for ransoms. The common soldiers faced a harder fate, with many sold into slavery, though Saladin personally paid for the freedom of some of the poorer knights. The Battle of Hattin represented more than just a military victory. It was a decisive shift in the balance of power in the Holy Land. Saladin's triumph was a masterpiece of tactical warfare, combining careful preparation, strategic patience, and decisive execution. For the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem, it was an unmitigated disaster from which it would never fully recover. The road to Jerusalem now lay open, and with it, the fate of the entire Crusader presence in the Holy Land hung in the balance. The dust had barely settled on the battlefield of Hattin when Saladin began his systematic conquest of the Crusader kingdom. The victory had not merely destroyed an army, it had shattered the defensive backbone of the Latin East. Without its heavy cavalry, military orders, and experienced commanders, the kingdom's elaborate network of castles and fortified cities, built up over nearly a century, became vulnerable targets rather than guarantors of Christian control. Saladin's campaign following Hattin demonstrated the same strategic brilliance that had won him the battle. Moving systematically along the coast, his forces captured one Crusader stronghold after another. Acre, the kingdom's principal port, fell quickly. Beirut, Sidon, and other coastal cities followed. Each victory further isolated Jerusalem, cutting off potential routes for reinforcement or escape. By September, only a handful of major Crusader strongholds remained in Christian hands. The fall of Jerusalem itself unfolded as a demonstration of Saladin's complex character. After a brief siege, the city's defenders, led by Balian of Ibelin, sought terms. The negotiation that followed revealed Saladin at his most magnanimous. Unlike the bloody conquest by the First Crusaders in 1099, Jerusalem's capture in October 1187 was marked by restraint and mercy. Saladin arranged for the safe departure of the Christian population, personally subsidized ransoms for thousands who could not afford them, and guaranteed the protection of Christian holy sites. This contrast between Christian and Muslim conquests of Jerusalem would resonate through centuries of historical memory. The news of Jerusalem's fall sent shockwaves through Europe. Pope Gregory VIII issued the papal bull Audita Tremendi, calling for what would become the Third Crusade. The response mobilized three of Europe's most powerful monarchs: Frederick Barbarossa of Germany, Philip II of France, and Richard I the Lionheart of England. Their campaigns would add another dramatic chapter to the story of the Holy Land, though they would never fully reverse the strategic transformation wrought by Hattin. For the survivors of the Old Kingdom, the aftermath of Hattin brought profound changes. Guy of Lusignan, released from captivity in 1188, attempted to rebuild his authority by laying siege to Acre with a newly arrived Crusader force. His efforts, though ultimately contributing to the city's recapture during the Third Crusade, could not restore his damaged reputation. The kingdom that eventually emerged from the Third Crusade was a weakened coastal state, dependent on external support and confined to a narrow strip along the Mediterranean. Saladin's final years were consumed by the challenge of defending his conquests against the Third Crusade, particularly against Richard the Lionheart's military brilliance. Their confrontation would become legendary, marked by mutual respect even amid fierce fighting. When Saladin died in 1193, he left an empire that had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the eastern Mediterranean. His legacy endured not just in military victories, but in the administrative systems, cultural achievements, and diplomatic precedents he established. Looking beyond the immediate aftermath, the Battle of Hattin marked a decisive shift in the history of Christian-Muslim relations in the Middle East. The Crusader states, though they would persist in various forms for another century, never regained their former power. The dream of a permanent Latin Christian kingdom in the Holy Land, born in the First Crusade's success, effectively died on the scorching plains below the horns of Hattin. The battle's lessons in leadership, strategy, and the consequences of unity versus division have resonated through military history. Saladin's victory demonstrated how superior organization, strategic patience, and tactical flexibility could overcome even the formidable heavy cavalry of medieval Europe. The Crusaders' defeat illustrated how political fragmentation, poor leadership, and strategic inflexibility could undermine even the strongest military advantages. More broadly, the events of 1187 left an indelible mark on both Islamic and Western cultural memory. In the Islamic world, Saladin became the embodiment of righteous leadership and successful resistance to external domination. His example would inspire generations of leaders and reformers. In Europe, the loss of Jerusalem sparked not only the Third Crusade, but also a long process of reflection on the nature of Christian-Muslim relations and the limits of military power. For historians, the Battle of Hattin and its aftermath provide a unique window into medieval warfare, leadership, and cross-cultural interaction. The detailed accounts left by both Christian and Muslim chroniclers allow us to reconstruct not just the events themselves, but the complex web of motivations, fears, and aspirations that drove them. The contrasting leaderships of Saladin and Guy of Lusignan offer timeless lessons about the qualities needed to unite diverse constituencies and navigate complex political challenges. The story of Hattin reminds us that history often turns on the decisions of individuals operating under immense pressure. Saladin's patient building of a unified empire, Guy's fateful march from Sephoria, and the choices made by countless others shaped not just their own fates but the future of regions and religions. Their experiences continue to resonate with modern audiences, offering insights into leadership, strategy, and the complex interplay between faith, power, and human nature. In the end, the Battle of Hattin stands as more than just a pivotal military encounter. It represents a moment when the medieval world pivoted, when the balance of power shifted decisively, and when the actions of leaders under pressure determined the fate of kingdoms. Its lessons and legacies continue to inform our understanding of leadership, warfare, and the enduring impact of decisive moments in history.